The proceeding will start shortly.
Order, order. Anthony Magnell to move the motion.
I beg to move that this House has considered the bicentenary of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. It is my honour and privilege to open and close today's debate on the RNLI, and in doing so to recognise its history, praise its work, celebrate and thank its volunteers, and put on record that this House understands, appreciates and values this magnificent, long-standing organisation. Throughout 2024, across the country, there will be moments where communities will come together to mark the extraordinary 200 years of the RNLI. Already on the 4th of March, 1,800 crew of the RNLI assembled in Westminster Abbey for a service of Thanksgiving. In May, the month becomes May Day month, on which the 18th and 19th of May will see a series of community activities, including a lifeboat festival in Poole. On the 25th of July, there is World Drowning Prevention Day. On the 1st of August, One Moment for One Crew, encouraging RNLI volunteers to celebrate within their own communities. On the 10th of October, the anniversary of the first ever street collection held in Manchester and the birth of the most successful fundraising campaign ever seen will be celebrated. On top of which, Madam Chair, there is also the 200 Voices podcast on the RNLI website, where you can listen to 200 people explain how the RNLI has impacted their lives, and I strongly recommend it. From the humble beginnings to its modern-day integrated network of volunteers, fundraisers and supporters, crisscrossing the country, the RNLI is not just an emergency service, but a great British brand that exhibits the very best of our spirit. It was on the Isle of Man in 1824 that Sir William Hillary proposed the concept of an organisation to save lives at sea. With an average 1,800 shipwrecks a year, Sir William proposed the Royal National Institution for the Preservation of Lives and Property from Shipwrecks. Despite numerous rejections, including being pushed back by the Navy and ministers of the day, he appealed to the philanthropic organisations of the time, who with alacrity took up the cause, and on the 4th of March 1824 held a meeting in the City of London Tavern, officially forming and ratifying the institution. Possibly the best idea ever to come out of a pub. With royal patronage granted, and in 1854 the name changed to the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, Sir William's vision was undoubtedly recognised, although whether he would have ever imagined that the RNLI would have 238 stations, operate 440 lifeboats, provide lifeguards for 200 beaches and be responsible for the rescuing of some 146,000 people over its history, it is of course impossible to know. However, that ambition and determination created an organisation from which we all benefit and from whose charter still stands the test of time, declaring that the RNLI will assist in saving life from shipwreck and be supported by annual subscriptions and donations and other contributions to its funds. Today, the RNLI holds legendary status. For those of us who have grown up in coastal communities or who are fortunate enough to represent one, we have long been moved by the tales of epic heroism where volunteers, members of their community, have put their lives on the line for others. Whether it be the sinking of the Mexico in the Ribble Estuary in 1886, or the White Star Line of the SS Suevic, its shipwrecked off the Lizard in Cornwall in 1907, where the RNLI crew managed to rescue all 456 passengers, including 70 babies, over 16 hours in an oar-powered boat. Or the RNLI's support in the Dunkirk evacuation, where over 100,000 soldiers were said to have been saved as a result of RNLI boats. To Henry Freeman and his infamous, innovative cork life jacket, and the iconic Henry Blogg. To the heroism of Grace Darling in the 1838 crisis in Forfarshire. To Margaret Armstrong, who helped every single launch of the Cresswell lifeboat, saving lives for over 50 years until her death in 1928. The RNLI has, without prejudice, always come to the aid of those in danger on the sea, whether it be the enemy during the First and Second World War, or merchant sailors in peril, or holidaymakers caught out, or refugees crossing the Channel. I'd be delighted to.
Actually, I'm on securing the debate. Just on the issue of the diversity of problems that the RNLI are faced with in terms of holidaymakers. In my constituency in Portrush, there's an RNLI boat, and the crew and volunteers do excellent work, sometimes off treacherous waters off the north coast of Northern Ireland and the east coast of Scotland. Would he join with me, as I know he will, in commending them and ensuring that the wider public support all of our RNLI crews and volunteers as possibly as great as they can to maximise the return and save even more lives in the future?
Thank you, Honourable Member, for making the point, and especially in high tourism areas, especially where there's been a dramatic increase post-pandemic, where the RNLI have seen more shouts, more call-outs to go and rescue holidaymakers. It's absolutely essential that right across the United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland, we are supporting our RNLI crews, supporting their volunteers, supporting their fundraising efforts, and strengthening their hand in what they do. And I thank him for his intervention. Their remit, the remit of the RNLI, is simple: to help anyone in danger on the sea. These tales of events and individuals throughout the RNLI's history have not only inspired the next generation of volunteers, but also helped to explain why there are so many families across this country who have served the RNLI through its existence. In doing so, those volunteers have provided a magnificent, quiet heroism and public service to their communities, country, and fellow human beings. The volunteer power of the RNLI is all the more remarkable when you consider that for almost 90 years, the lifeboats of the RNLI were powered by nothing other than the strength of man and launched by hand and horsepower. The steady evolution of the RNLI has today resulted in a modern and up-to-date fleet that has replaced oar power with engine power. But the ability to upgrade the fleet and to provide new equipment has only been brought about by the generosity of the British public and by businesses. The RNLI has always been independent of government and will always remain so. As a result, it relies on the support of donors to meet the cost of its life-saving activities. And as we politicians look on in envy, the RNLI have perfected the art of fundraising and have set exacting standards to develop long-standing relationships with supporters and ensure financial stability. The figures, Madam Chair, speak for themselves. The RNLI raised £177 million in 2022 and over £181 million in 2021. Within those public fundraisers, there have also been generous bequests, which bizarrely include a set of gold teeth and 2 vintage Ferraris. Regardless of what is donated, it is all helping to ensure that the RNLI is able to respond to shouts anywhere across our coastline and to help those in danger with the most up-to-date equipment and facilities. Just consider the fact that in 2023, up to July, the RNLI had to launch their lifeboats 9,192 times, the equivalent of 16 times a day. They saved 269 lives and assisted 10,734 people at sea. A remarkable number and a remarkable significance to the work that they do. It is also extraordinary to see businesses playing a role in those fundraising efforts. The Baltic Exchange, for instance, has, for over 150 years, supported the lifeboat based in Salcombe in South Devon, hence the very subtle name, the Baltic Exchange 3. These fundraising efforts have allowed the RNLI to focus on what they do best, and perhaps most importantly, have ensured that the RNLI is immune from political interference and can be truly independent. Now, just as the equipment and machinery have modernised, so too has the provision and scale of what the RNLI offers. Starting originally with lifeboats and lifeboat stations, the RNLI now runs a Safety at Sea initiative with their Float to Live campaign, as well as providing lifeguards on now 240 UK beaches, who in 2023 carried out almost 3 million preventative actions, as well as attending 14,000 incidents, helping 19,979 people and saving 86 lives. Its international arm is focused on making drowning prevention a priority worldwide and reducing the staggering 235,000 deaths a year that are caused by drowning. The RNLI has also been a key supporter in the National Independent Lifeboat Association, which I founded 2 years ago to represent the 54 independent lifeboat stations of the United Kingdom. Its steady progress to help both at home and abroad is in part why the RNLI is such a well-loved institution and why it carries the support and confidence of the British public, and I hope I can safely say of this House as well. Now, while the purpose of this debate is to recognise the RNLI as a national organisation and to celebrate its work across the country, it would be remiss of me not to mention the RNLI stations in South Devon. Torbay RNLI lifeboat station, based in Brixham, was established in 1866 and has been busily protecting our channel waters ever since. I was pleased to be able to attend a service of thanksgiving organised by the Fishermen's Mission earlier this year and to reflect upon their work in protecting those at sea and also salute their volunteers who have, since 1866, attended thousands of shouts, rescued thousands of people and saved countless lives. The Salcombe RNLI lifeboat was established in 1869 and is tragically remembered for one of the worst lifeboat disasters in the RNLI's history, when in 1916 the returning lifeboat capsized on the Salcombe Bar and 13 of the 15-man crew drowned, devastating the town and the close-knit community. Memorial headstones recall and mark this tragedy either side of the mouth of the estuary. The Dart RNLI, established in 1878 and then closed shortly thereafter, was reopened in 2007. The reopening was fortuitous, as last year alone they had 46 shouts and aided 51 people in difficulty. They're currently fundraising for their new boathouse, which I expect to be greeted with the same level of generosity as the RNLI often receives. These 3 lifeboat stations are a necessity to coastal living. Their crews and support staff number well over 100 volunteers, and they've battled against some of the most ferocious storms to save those at sea, as well as dealing with thousands of visitors who flock to our beaches each and every year. The people of South Devon owe them an enormous amount, and we do not for a single second forget their courage and bravery in volunteering for the RNLI. I would like to also state our thanks to the crew of the RNLI lifeboat stations across the country. They are all part of the rich heritage that puts others before themselves. They put themselves in harm's way to rescue those in need, and too often friends, families and fellow volunteers pay the price. The 800 names on the RNLI memorial in Poole serves as a reminder of the dangers they face, but also the hope that must be felt by any individual in danger when they see the colours of the RNLI racing towards them. As Sir William Hillary said, without courage, nothing is impossible. Sorry, actually, with courage, nothing is impossible. Apologies. Finally, I'd like to finish by paying tribute to the outgoing Chief Executive, Mark Dowie, who finishes his 5-year terms in June. Mark has been an extraordinary leader of the RNLI over the past 5 years. He has had to deal with COVID, channel crossings, rising inflation, increase in demand, and even unfair and inaccurate political comments. He has risen above all of these, and he leaves the RNLI in an even stronger place with his name alongside those pioneering, innovative founders and fundraisers of the RNLI who have made it what it is today. Today we mark in Parliament and celebrate the 200 years of the RNLI, and I pray for calm seas, fair winds, and that they will continue to perform their masterful, brave work for the next 2 centuries. Thank you.
This House has considered the bicentenary of the RNLI. Margaret Greenwood.
Thank you, Ms Harris. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. And I'd like to congratulate the member for Totnes for securing this very important debate. This year marks the bicentenary of the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, an extraordinary organisation that simply could not operate without the outstanding bravery and courage of those involved. RNLI lifeboat crews launched over 9,000 times in 2022, aiding 16,476 people and saving 389 lives. RNLI crews, the vast majority volunteers, put their own lives at risk to save those of other people. They do so at all hours of the day and night, often setting out onto very rough seas. Many families have been involved with the RNLI for decades, with expertise handed down through the generations. As has been said, being involved in a lifeboat station is a way of life. I feel honoured to represent a constituency with 2 RNLI lifeboat stations, one at Hoylake and the other at West Kirby. Crews are prepared to go out in all weathers to rescue people, whether that be people in yachts, dinghies or canoes, those who have got caught by the tide when walking out to Hilbury Island, or to rescue people in large commercial vessels. It's a long tradition of courage in West Wirral, of which local people are quite rightly proud. The first lifeboat station in Hoylake was founded in 1803, before the RNLI was established in 1824. Those early lifeboats were dragged into the sea by horses, their effectiveness reliant on the strength of the crews at the oars. In 1810, tragedy struck when 8 men were drowned out of a crew of 10 as they tried to give assistance to their ship called the Traveller, to a ship called the Traveller. It was a disaster that struck the entire local community. One report, cited in Nicholas Leach's excellent book, Hoylake and West Kirby Lifeboats and Illustrated History, describes the aftermath. The bodies of the lifeboat men were found the same day and carried to their respective homes, where a scene of misery was witnessed which defies all power of expression. The deceased were all near neighbours and lived in a small village called the House near Hoylake. These brave fellows were the flower of the Hoylake fishermen and always displayed the greatest promptitude and alacrity in assisting vessels in distress. Nor could England boast a set of braver men. They have left large families totally unprovided for. To mark the bicentenary of that disaster, a memorial to those lost was unveiled outside the RNLI Lifeboat House in Hoylake in December 2010, and due respect afforded by today's lifeboat crews, members of the local community, and descendants of those who had lost their lives in 1810. Thankfully, things have come a long way since those perilous days. In 2014, a new 13-metre Shannon lifeboat was stationed at Hoylake, where it remains today. It's a state-of-the-art vessel with every conceivable safety feature. The smaller West Kirby inshore lifeboats were introduced in the 1960s. The roll call of brave men and women who serve at Hoylake and West Kirby are a source of great pride to the local community. Without them, there would be no rescue service for people who get into difficulty at sea and on the estuary. Fundraising is crucial to the RNLI, and it's unsurprising that local people are so keen to support them. It's vital that this support continues because less than 1% of RNLI funding income comes from government. The stories of rescues are heroic indeed. I have had the great privilege of hearing at first hand from John Curry, chair of the Hoylake and West Kirby RNLI Management Group, about some of these rescues. There is one powerful image that stays firmly in my mind, and that is the image of the hand reaching out from the waves. It's an image of a drowning man, woman or child at the very last moments while rescue is still possible. The intense bravery and dedication of the RNLI volunteers who will put themselves at risk to reach out and grasp such a hand before it sinks beneath the waves deserves all of our thanks and tribute.
Well, thank you, Ms. Harris. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And in starting, I definitely need to congratulate my honourable friend and next-door neighbour, the member for Totnes, on securing this debate, and my colleagues on the Backbench Business Committee for agreeing it. It's very apt to be celebrating the 200th anniversary of the RNLI, given the role they play in the communities for South Devon. As has already been mentioned, the Torbay RNLI has been operating since 1866, serving both commercial merchantman traffic and keeping holidaymakers and those visiting the South Coast safe. And it's been really an organisation that's been very much at the heart of the community since then. As touched on, it is based on volunteers and it is based on the community funding and supporting it. And it's easy to see why the RNLI is such a loved institution when you look at some of the stories of heroism of its members. And in Torbay, we actually have Keith Bauer, who I think is one of only 3 living holders of the gold medal for conspicuous gallantry. You know, the speech has already referred to those crews who sadly have lost their lives, but there's many occasions when volunteers will have absolutely pushed to the limits what they could do to try and save someone in distress. And it's right that we pay tribute and remember them. And it was great to see Keith at the heart of the recent service of Thanksgiving at Westminster, having recognition of the role so many play in extreme conditions to try and save the lives of others, people they will probably never have met before, and going out of their way to bring them home safe to them and for them and their families. And it is worth noting how the team that we see at the front, and myself and the member for Totnes have an interesting debate about the Torbay RNLI, because the station is on the land in Brixham, part of his constituency, and the boat is moored up in the waters of Brixham Harbour, which, due to the anomalies of how Torbay runs its harbour authority, is part of mine. But we do see they're loved across across the bay. And that's why seeing the event on the 4th of March, when the fleet was out, being saluted by so many people who attended on the land and also those on the waters who very much rely and are very much reassured by their constant presence. And it is worth noting that the Torbay Lifeboat fundraising team is the one that can help sustain the crew at the front. We had the song written by Roger Smith to commemorate and celebrate the 200th anniversary, but also the whole network that exists throughout the year at raising the funds that are absolutely vital to support the team that we see visibly out on the water. It's also worth noting how the RNLI actually supports the wider work of the community. We obviously innately will think of the emergency call-outs, you know, when someone's in distress and the lifeboat is called out to try and identify them and to try and bring them back to safety. But it's worth noting the range of other things that can happen. I always think it's a moment for reflection when I'm about to do the Boxing Day, walking to the sea at Paint and Sands, where you see the lifeboat pull up beforehand. It acts as effectively provides the safety boat. And, you know, obviously it's a slightly thought-provoking moment. You sit there thinking, is this the best decision I've ever made? I'm about to walk into freezing cold water with the lifeboat pulling up to keep safe. But it does show what the RNLI does for the wider community. It's not just about the emergency shouts, but it's also about an event like that clearly needs some safety support, and they provide it. We're allowing thousands of pounds to be raised for other charities and fundraising in the community, as well as an opportunity to get rather cold as well on a Boxing Day, if that will help shake off anything from the day before. And I'd also say it's worth mentioning that in the 200-year history of the RNLI, they've obviously also been supported by other institutions that contribute towards their effort and share their goals. And it's well worth mentioning the NCI Torbay via their station up at Daddy Hole Plain, who work closely with Torbay RNLI, both committed to exactly the same purpose of keeping safe those using the waters around our bay. So, Mr Harris, this is an institution that has been well loved for 200 years and well supported for 200 years. It shows the best of our communities, and it makes sure our communities are safe even in the most perilous of conditions. They've had a successful 200 years in which they've gone from strength to strength, and I see no reason why they won't go to even further success and many, many thousands more lives saved over the next 200 years. Yeah.
To serve under your chairship, and may I congratulate the Honourable Member for Totnes for his excellent and may I also say stirring speech about the service of the RNLI across this country. And I would like to pay my own tribute to the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. It's a wonderful service, and today's speeches are quite inspiring. And I'm here really to say thank you on behalf, obviously, of an inland community, but also to raise a related point about water safety. The RNLI has had 200 years of service to this country, and it is indeed a privilege to speak in today's debate. I wanted to pick up on some important points made by the Honourable Gentleman. He talked about the the expansion of the RNLI into taking over beach safety, and also its international work and its educational work, which is hugely important. These are important matters, and indeed the RNLI already covers estuaries of major rivers. Obviously, I represent a town further upstream beyond the tidal reach of the Thames. The tidal section goes as far as Teddington, and Reading is some way from there. However, we do every year have tragedies in the river where people fall in and in some cases need to be rescued. And the police are the rescuing authority. However, I've been approached by a number of residents, particularly boat owners, small businesses, and others who are based by the river, who have access to rescue craft potentially, who want to learn more about the experience of the RNLI and how inland waterways could be potentially made safer in assisting the police with rescue by trained people, personnel who are used to driving boats in river situations. One of my residents, in fact, was awarded a medal by Thames Valley Police for doing exactly this last year. He actually, very short notice, jumped in his boat and rescued somebody who'd fallen into the river. And the gentleman concerned was quite severely injured and had struggled and was no longer really able to swim, but was floating downstream in the centre of the river, some way from the bank. And if it hadn't been for this gentleman, I understand the incident could have been much worse. So I really wanted to address my points to the Minister to ask him if it's possible to look into the experience of the RNLI with regard to inland waterways and see what we might be able to learn as as a country, and to not only thank the RNLI for its absolutely outstanding work in saving lives at sea, which I think has been beautifully spoken about today, and we all share that great sense of gratitude to this wonderful institution, but also to perhaps see what might be possible to be learnt from that experience of collective endeavour, which the Honourable Member spoke about so effectively and clearly earlier in his quite inspiring speech. So I just really wanted to pose that question to the Minister and to see what might be done to perhaps allow some further assistance to local police forces, who are the rescuing authority in inland waterways, but often are under enormous pressure, and police boats are often may take some time to get to an emergency. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Therese Coffey.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to speak in this debate today and under your chairmanship. And I congratulate my honourable friend for securing this debate. The RNLI has been an important institution in the United Kingdom since formed 200 years ago. Indeed, in Suffolk, the Suffolk Association was actually formed, of lifeboats was formed in the same year, in 1824, but wisely handed over its assets and people to the RNLI in 1853. But at that time, in 1824, there had been such boats set up in Felixstowe, Broadsea, and out of my constituency, but in Lowestoft, and a few years later, also in Thorpeness and Sizewell. And this, no doubt, this institution has been vital in saving lives. It's also been where people have lost their lives in the giving of others as well. And I know that is recognised around the country. But the devastation that can have in a community, of course, will live for generations to come and is rightly recognised. In terms of activities undertaken by the RNLI, I pay huge tribute to all those who have served in that lifetime of the stations that we still have around the country. My own constituency has 2 stations currently in Southwold and Aldborough, and indeed is served by the people of Harwich, just across the river in Essex. And there's also a National Independent Lifeboat Association member in Felixstowe, set up more recently, just over 25 years ago. And I know the dedication that those principally volunteers have in being on call, being ready to move. Also, the lifeguards that operate on some of our beaches as well have been integral in making sure that people are safe in the water. I also want to commend the Guild. That is every branch has one, every station has one. But I know that Aldborough was set up in 1962 and has been absolutely vital to the ongoing operation of that station. If I turn to Southwold, I think I did praise Southwold, the operatives, in 2013, because on the 26th of May 2013, it was a small group of the crew that were out on exercise, but then gathered to deploy the single largest ever piece of recovery in peacetime, and that was 85 people on the 26th of May in just one event where a swimming race went horribly wrong. Ben Locke and Lucy Clues were the lifeguards there who saw the issue straight away. The crew was mobilised by the lifeguard supervisor, Dan Tyler, and then helmsman Simon Callahan, Paul Barker, Rob Kelvey came into action, later supported by Liam Fail Tara. That was absolutely astonishing, and to date I don't believe there's been any other peacetime, apart from potentially there may be situations currently off the Sussex and Kent coasts. But I think that recognition deserves to be put into Hansard once more, as indeed people could have lost their lives doing that. In terms of one of the things I want to commend Simon Hazelgrove and the team today, who continue to have that operate that life station, and I look forward to inviting them and indeed the people from Aldborough to an event here in Parliament, hopefully in May, if not June. In terms of the other branch, the other life station, that's down in Aldborough, a little bit further down, it's slightly more complicated to launch a boat in Aldborough because it's a shingle beach. So the whole operation is even bigger. Not only at the moment do they have a Mersey-class boat, but also there's a significant operation that has to be done of literally using a tractor, using kind of wooden poles to help move the boat on and off. So in many ways, it's a much bigger operation. And it's tremendous of a town the size of Aldborough that sort of activity can be mustered at pretty short time. And I'm conscious that there's been some turbulence recently, but I want to celebrate the good things, including the service that was recently led by the Bishop of Ipswich and St Edmundsbury just earlier this month to commemorate that 200th anniversary. Aldborough has currently an all-weather boat, the Freddie Cooper. It was started in 1993, and indeed an inshore boat called the Susan Scott from 2017. And it's to that I turn my voice of somewhat of a sad moment for this, but also I think a tale that needs to be told of recent leadership, which in my view has been quite shabby. It worries me about aspects of culture, and I am sad for the people of Aldborough, who themselves were sad about what has happened. And we all know that change can be difficult. But I think one of the things that the RNLI, as it looks ahead to the next 200 years and many years ahead, needs to understand it relies on the goodwill of the local communities, never mind the huge amount of work that goes into supporting the institution nationally. And I think it just needs to reflect on how it should treat things differently going forward when they are dealing with local communities. I'm not the only Member of Parliament that's been affected by that, but indeed. One of the comments that really brought it to mind was a comment made by a volunteer, or somebody involved, I should say. Appalling betrayal of a community that has been nothing but supportive. Disgraceful management of the situation by RNLI HQ raises concerns about the culture of this charity. Now, I think by and large, the RNLI has been absolutely amazing, but it does need to learn, I think, from this sad situation. And this is when change was happening, a review that was being undertaken meant that Aldborough would no longer have an all-weather lifeboat. It would have a RIB, as they're called. And this was of concern to local community because they'd been used to having an all-weather lifeboat. It had been deployed. Unlike Southwold, their boats hadn't been deployed as part of the Dunkirk operation, but it had been deployed during peacetime and wartime, and recognising the local seas. Now, in terms of financial money, legacies have been left in order to support this in the RNLI's own accounts. It indicated that there were restricted funds specifically for the replacement of an all-weather lifeboat, and they were in the accounts of the RNLI. And then all of a sudden, the decision was made, with some internal consultation, that that would not be the case. And there was upset, there was uproar, and as a local Member of Parliament, I was asked to raise this with the RNLI. And to my surprise, the RNLI refused to meet. And I was somewhat shocked by that. I was somewhat shocked that, as elected representative, conscious this has got nothing to do with government. Nothing to do with government. I understand that. Nothing to do with politics. Of course, it benefits from things like tax relief and other aspects in that regard in its fundraising. But that's not the reason I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it because I was a member of the community, and the community had felt shut out. I won't give away yet, no. Eventually, in terms of the conversations back and forth that I had through correspondence, it was only because I knew one of the trustees that I was able to get a phone call with the then Chief Executive. The then Chief Executive insisted that call could only be done if it was private and that the details of the conversation would not be shared. I was prepared to take the call under that condition because it turned out the then Chief Executive, had already been to the station. I turned up the day after the Chief Executive had been, and not all the volunteers had been informed that the Chief Executive was visiting. Turns out this was part of a tour. There was a tour being done. It got advertised or proudly photographs and similar in other stations that had been on the tour, including one at Southwold. But there was radio silence when it came to Aldborough. Now, one of the things that concerns me, and I kept my part of the bargain, I did record the phone call because I don't have the best memory, but I had assumed that the conversation would be private too. And I was sad to learn just last week that the Chief Executive did in fact record the call and also played that to another Member of Parliament. I'm not going to say who the other Member of Parliament is. I don't need to embarrass them or the Chief Executive. But I'm telling this story because I am concerned about the culture. And indeed, the chair of the trustees did offer to meet me at some point and then seems to have withdrawn the meeting. or certainly we've not been able to find a time to do that. Now, within the local community, this hasn't been received well. Not all volunteers were informed. A subsequent meeting that I attended with Aldeburgh Town Council and one of the leading local leadership later complained to the Town Council that I had been at that meeting. I'm not sure why. Perhaps I was concerned about the culture that was there. But some of the things that were said at that meeting I've chosen not to reveal to the community because it would embarrass the RNLI. I don't seek to do that. It would also really upset the volunteers who go out on that boat every day or are on standby to go out every day. But at the same time, people are wondering where the money has gone. And indeed, what we can see in the accounts of the RNLI, that the cost of wages and salaries and similar in 2020 was 83.3 million and is now 102.3 million. So one of the things that, as I say, this is a sad moment for me, and I will wind up. I did go to the Charity Commission and similar. But I want to say I really wish the RNLI success in the next 200 years. It's got to do this with the strong support of its communities. And sadly, some of those volunteer crew have now stepped away. So I wish those well. I wish all the stations around the country well. But let's make sure that the RNLI gets strengthened. And by doing that with transparency rather than secrecy, I think is the way forward.
And very much can commend the Honourable Gentleman for Totnes for setting the scene so very well and focusing upon the bicentenary of the RNLI. That'll be what my... Sorry.
While we're speakers. Thank you, Jim Shannon.
Okay. Yeah. Madam Chair, I'll focus upon what the title of the subject matter in Westminster Hall is today, because I think that's important. That's why we're all here, and that's the purpose. I always with others want to speak upon the tremendous work that the RNLI carry out through the UK, and that's an opportunity to highlight the wonderful RNLI right across this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I always say that because it's important for me to remember the Union and where we all are, and it's one of the things I came in 2010 and use that terminology on every occasion. As we're all very aware, the RNLI have reached the inspirational milestone of 200 years of service to the community. And heading from a constituent with a huge peninsula, Strangford Lough on one side, Derry Sea on the other, I'm minded of that poem that I learned when I was very young, Madam Chair. Water, water everywhere, and not a drop to drink, because we're surrounded by sea water on both sides. And that perhaps illustrates the importance of this emergency service and what it does for us in the area that I represent, Strangford, but indeed for us who live in the Irish Peninsula as well. I was amazed to learn that this month the volunteer lifeboat crews and lifeguards have saved an incredible 146,277 lives during this 2 centuries of lifesaving. If you needed any illustration of the importance of the RNLI, that's it. All those people are significant number one, 146,277. At the charity's 10 lifeboat stations in Northern Ireland, lifeboats have launched 9,472 times, with their volunteers saving 1,535 lives, and also coming to the aid of thousands more, because there's so much that they've done, so much they can do. Since the introduction of lifeguards to Northern Ireland in 2011, the RNLI seasonal teams based along the Causeway Coast that my honourable friend and colleague for East London Derry represents, and in County Down have responded to 2,894 incidents, coming to the aid of 3,461 people, 47 of whom were lives saved. So that's what this is about. It's about the lives saved and the commitments given. As the RNLI website states, 2 centuries have seen vast developments in the lifeboats and the kit used by the charity's lifesavers, from the early oar-powered vessels to today's technology-packed boats, which are now built in-house by the charity, and from the rudimentary cork life jackets of the 1850s to the full protective kit each crew member is now issued with. The RNLI's life-saving reach and remit has also developed over the course of 200 years. The charity designs and builds its own lifeboats and runs domestic and international water safety programmes. I think the Honourable Gentleman for Totnes referred to that in his introduction. Today, among the 238 lifeboat stations across this, Ireland and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, 10 operate out of Northern Ireland, including one in my constituent Strangford and Portaferry. I visited on a number of occasions, have a very good relationship with them. And one of the stalwarts, Philip Johnson, who was one of the main leaders and organisers of the RNLI in Portaferry, has just retired, and we thank him for all his service over those years as well. Two others in the boundary in Ballinger and Donaghadee in the constituency of North Down. Again, just an illustration of the importance it is for us in the area that we represent. While much has changed in 200 years, two things have remained the same. The charity's dependence on volunteers who give their time and commitment to save others, and the voluntary contributions from the publics which have funded the service for the past 2 centuries. Again, an illustration of what it means. I was delighted that the local mayor and part of my constituency for Ards and North Down, the very capable mayor, Jennifer Gilmer, who just happens to be one of my party colleagues, but she has selected the RNLI as one of her charities and has carried out various fundraising activities. And the fact is that for many of her and my constituents, this is a vital service, and indeed there's a question to be put to bring this into the realms of emergency services to afford pay and grants towards equipment. It is sad that they really are the last emergency service, and yet government pays less than 1% of the funding. And I do believe that their service deserves more than that. So, Minister, it's not a criticism, by the way. It's not what I do when it comes to debates. But maybe you could give us some ideas of what government is able to do for the RNLI from a financial point of view. I understand the desire to be able to keep functioning free from government interference and the red paper that comes with that. However, I do not believe that a round of applause from the people in this House is enough, as it seemed to be at the time whenever the NHS were getting the round of applause, which we all did every week with real sincerity. I close with this comment. I would close by giving my sincere thanks and appreciation to all of those past and present volunteers who have sacrificed their lives, who have given up time. There's, some of the members have referred to the lifeboats and they went to sea, and when they came back, I think the Honourable Lady referred to that 8 of the 10 lifeboat crew were lost. I think the Honourable Gentleman for Totnes, the Honourable Gentleman for Torbay also mentioned about a 15 crew, and only 13 of them died and only 2 came back. So that gives you an idea of the sacrifice of it all is. So when it gives up their time for their loved ones at family events, who have given up paid working hours in order to use their skills and expertise to save lives and to help people to be as safe as possible on an untamable sea. Thank you for all you have done and do now. Your community, Madam Chair, could not operate without your valued service, and we celebrate the RNLI as a body and you as our hands and our feet today. Madam Chair, they've done much for us, they will do more. Let's support them and do the best we can in this place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs Harrison. Thank you to the Honourable Member for Totnes for bringing this important debate here today. Firstly, I would like to just pay my own tribute to the incredible work that the RNLI does. Since its establishment in 1824, its volunteers have consistently demonstrated immense courage. We know that, rescuing untold numbers of lives. And we honour them today and over the course of the next year with the 200 centenary celebrations, and of course those 144,000 people that have been saved by their work. The RNLI obviously holds particular importance in my constituency of North Norfolk, given the abundance of coastal communities. And I represent 52 miles of glorious coastline, whether it's the influx of tourists all over the summer or just the regular beach enthusiasts and dog walkers all year round. I know that my coast in North Norfolk is consistently bustling with activity, and as such the RNLI plays an incredibly important role in ensuring the safety and welfare of everybody that comes to use the North Norfolk coast. Now, of course, we cannot stand here today and talk about the RNLI without the significance of mentioning Henry Blogg, the most decorated lifeboatman in RNLI history, who served on Cromer's lifeboats and alongside his crew saved 873 lives, over 387 rescues over a length of service of 53 years. And his ancestors are still living and well connected in the Cromer community. Henry's story shines a great example on the importance that the RNLI holds in our local communities. But I'd like the Minister to pay particular attention on what I'm going to say next, as it has been in the newspapers a great deal locally, particularly yesterday. I'm sad to say sometimes I wish it hadn't have broken quite the way the story had broken, because it has caused a great deal of concern in the local area. but the Blogg, one of the vessels that Blogg served on was the Bailey, and the Bailey sits in the Cromer Museum, the Henry Blogg Museum, and you may well have seen that there are reports that the building has some water ingress, and of course this is a priceless artefact, priceless in the RNLI's history and to the people of Cromer. So I want to put on the record absolutely today, Mrs. Harris, that the Bailey belongs to Cromer. It belongs to the people of Cromer, and it must stay in Cromer. And I know that behind the scenes, the RNLI and the local district council are working together to try to put the building right, to get the remedial works salvaged, and so that the Bailey can remain in place. And I will do everything I can behind the scenes to help that to happen. And I want to reassure the people of Cromer and widely around North Norfolk that that is absolutely what we are driven to achieve. And if I need the Minister's help and support on that, I know that he is a good man and will give it. And indeed, whilst we have spoken about the Chief Executive, Mark Dowie, when I have raised this with him, within minutes, he's picked the telephone up. He knows how important the Bailey is as one of the most famous vessels in RNLI history and what it means to the people of Cromer. But I reiterate, we will do everything we can to make sure this priceless artefact is looked after properly in where its home should be. I can't mention every single lifeboat institution up and down my coast. It would take far too long. But we are incredibly well served in Wells, Sheringham, Cromer, Munsley and Haysborough all having a provision. I know it's like a picture postcard of book your trip to North Norfolk this summer. But Wells in the last year has had a new 2.5 million 42-foot Duke of Edinburgh, which I was privileged enough to see, brought out of its also brand new multi-million-pound boathouse just last year. It is absolutely phenomenal, and it is now operational. Sheringham needs absolutely no introduction. We have had already this year the world-famous, I'm going to say they're world-famous now, Sheringham shantymen singing to us, raising money for the RNLI station there, a wonderful dinner, and they do incredible amounts around my community, and of course Cromer, which I won't mention again. But they are absolutely synonymous with lifeboat history. So, Ms. Harris, just to finish up, we've talked a lot about the crew and the amazing work that they do. I just want to mention for 1 second the people who are often the unsung heroes, rather gloriously not referred to as the admin staff behind the scenes, but they are not necessarily the backbone of going out on the vessels, but they are the people that make the whole organisation tick. And if we didn't have those people rattling buckets on the high streets, running the RNLI shops, the entire organisation just wouldn't function. And so I want to pay a real tribute to all of the volunteers, not just on the vessels, but those behind the scenes as well. They are absolutely just as important as the heroic men and women that risk their lives to save other people's lives. And I wouldn't get away without saying that because my stepmother works in one of those businesses. Thank you.
Mrs. Harris, it's a pleasure to speak under your chairmanship, and I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend for Totnes for securing this important debate on the bicentenary of the RNLI. My island constituency of Unnasmorn has seen lives lost at sea for centuries, and many of our lifeboat stations began life as private community initiatives in response to such events. Improvements in technology have now superseded these smaller lifeboat operations in communities like Penmorn, Kemlyn, Roscollin, Kemais Bull Bay and Rosnaga. During the 19th and 20th century, there used to be 13 RNLI lifeboats on Anglesey. There are now 4 lifeboat stations, with 2 all-weather lifeboats at Marlborough and Holyhead, and inshore boats at Triartha and Beaumaris. Between them, these 4 stations have given over 500 years of service, and their brave volunteers have been awarded more than 100 RNLI medals for gallantry. These include the late Marlborough coxswain Richard Evans, BEM. Dick served for 50 years and was involved in the saving of over 250 lives. He's only one of 5 men to be awarded the RNLI Gold Medal twice, the highest accolade awarded to the institution and the equivalent of the Victoria Cross for bravery at sea. Most recently, in 2022, the crew of the Triartha Bay lifeboat received medals for the rescue of a female surfer during gale force 9 winds on the 20th of May, 2021. Helmsman Lee Duncan received the silver medal, with Dafydd Griffiths, Lee McCann and Michael Doran being awarded bronze medals in a rescue described as one of the finest acts of selflessness and courage of recent times in a 50-mile-an-hour storm. Earlier this year, in the Holyhead RNLI station, full-time coxswain Tony Price announced his retirement from the role, although he'll continue as a volunteer. In his time, Tony has dealt with significant incidents, including saving the Christopher Pierce lifeboat when the Holyhead Marina was destroyed in Storm Emma. Tony comes from a family with a long history of volunteering for the RNLI. And just last week, the strong ties between the lifeboats and our community were clearly demonstrated when the demolition of the old Anglesey aluminium chimney raised more than £10,000 for the Holyhead RNLI. The 120-metre-high chimney, which dominated the landscape for 50 years, has been cleared to make way for Stenner's Prosperity Park, a key part of the new Anglesey Freeport. In just 7 days, more than 900 tickets were purchased in the prize draw to press the demolition button. All the proceeds have gone to the Holyhead RNLI in memory of local lifeboatman Ewan Williams, who sadly passed away last year. Geraint Williams, who was originally from Aberfrau, won the winning ticket. And last year, Anglesey singing sensation Ren Gill visited Beaumaris lifeboat station after raising more than £15,000 for the local RNLI in recognition of their work, searching for his best friend Joe, to whom he dedicated his album Freckled Angels. And this year, to celebrate the Bicentenary Holyhead lifeboat, are proud to be handing the 200-year commemorative baton on to Chemyse Bay Harbour Master Dafydd Williams aboard the 1907 rowing and sailing lifeboat, the Charles Henry Ashley. Dafydd will then hand it over to the Mulver crew. And then on the 20th of April, the Beaumaris RNLI will be hosting a celebration black tie event at the Canolfan, Beaumaris, with music from the Seindorf Beaumaris Band and the Suspects, and food provided by Gatehouse Catering. I'd like to close by saying that the RNLI is part of our island's DNA. From Graham Drinkwater, who laid the foundations from Triartha Bay Lifeboat Station, to its chairman, Jack Abbott, who was awarded a Royal Humane Society testimonial for using his skills to rescue and resuscitate a drowning man in 2001, just weeks after undergoing open-heart surgery. There are too many heroic events to relate, and too many past and present RNLI volunteers on Anglesey to name here. From people like Ocean Roberts and Arwell Owen, who man the lifeboats, to Phil Henn for his brilliant photos, and to Shirley Rogerson, who tirelessly fundraises. Diolch yn fawr to you all, and those like you across the United Kingdom, for the over 146,000 lives you have saved over the past 200 years. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Ms Harris. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair, and can I congratulate the member for Totnes for securing the debate. It's always good to have some of these debates before we have recess, and I hope, if I don't get the opportunity, to wish all honourable members and the clerks and everyone else a very good Easter when it comes. Ms Harris, when you mention the emergency services, most people would picture a vehicle used to protect people or save lives, say an ambulance, a police car or a fire engine. That's what people see on a daily basis in urban communities like mine. So they might not immediately think of that fourth essential vehicle, the lifeboat. The Glasgow South West constituency is on the south bank of the Clyde, and travelling downstream from it we have the lifeboat stations of Helensburgh in the Firth of Clyde, then others at Largs and Troon on the Clyde coast. People from Glasgow South West have been going down the water for most of the time the RNLI has existed, and many will have benefited greatly from the rescue service in that time. For those staying in the city and not making that exotic journey to the Costa Clyde, there have often been the temptation to spend time near the River Clyde itself, an activity which can be quite hazardous. And for that reason, the Glasgow Humane Society has long had a base upstream at Glasgow Green, which performs life-saving services in the Clyde and other local waterways. For 40 years, and up until only recently, the Glasgow Humane Society was operated by George Parsonage, and then his son, Dr. George Parsonage, MBE, who pulled thousands from the Clyde, saving many lives. But the Society has a much longer history than that. The Glasgow Humane Society is the oldest practical life-saving organisation in the world. Having been founded in 1790, Counties Glaswegians have since owed their lives to their officers, volunteers and directors. That society, admittedly, has a remit which is local to the Glasgow area. But looking further afield, the RNLI lifeboats in Scotland have launched 45,853 times, saving 11,878 lives. That means over a quarter of all rescues in Scotland have resulted in a life saved. And looking even further afield to across these islands, a term most appropriate in this context, members will know that the RNLI is reckoned to have saved a total of 146,277 lives. As a proportion of the population, the number of lives saved in Scotland is particularly high. And this might be a great surprise to those who have crossed the Minch or the Pentland Firth during a Highland gale or in any other of Scotland's 790 islands in weather which we would call a good day for the washing or a good drying day, Miss Harris. Miss Harris, it's easy as I have done to make light of the dangers of such journeys, but there is a much more serious edge to it. In defining bravery, a common example is of ordinary people running away from burning buildings while firefighters run into them. And so it is with lifeboat crews who choose to launch and enter the tempest while others would be rushing for safe havens. What makes this behaviour even more remarkable is that those carrying out such feats of bravery are volunteers, all 32,000 of them. They don't expect a high-salary professional career. They do this out of principle and compassion. That compassion is obvious, but let's look more closely at the principle of who the RNLI would seek to rescue. It's often said, half-jokingly, that in the United States of America, a hospital or ambulance will first check someone's bank balance before checking their pulse. Fortunately, that's not the current policy in our National Health Service. In a similar vein, Mark Dowie, the RNLI Chief Executive, has said that right from the get-go in 1824, we said that the lifeboat service would rescue whoever needed our help, wherever they are, whoever and wherever. That therefore includes rescuing migrants in the English Channel because of that humane work. It is disappointing when you have Nigel Farage and others describing the RNLI as a taxi service for illegal migration. Let me make it clear that I and my colleagues utterly and should utterly disassociate ourselves from such views. I'll give way.
I think Prince will be referring to the RNLI lifeboat at Dungeness and at Littlestone in my constituency, and there is a strong community support for the excellent work they've done from, in 1943, rescuing British servicemen at Dunkirk to the work they do today in the Channel to keep people safe, whoever they are.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And he's quite right to mention Dunkirk, as other honourable members have on this debate. We do, however, should agree with Mark Dowie when he says that the day that the RNLI turns round to the Coast Guard and says, "I'm awfully sorry, can you tell me where these people are from?" before they respond, then that's the end, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that we all should associate ourselves with the Chief Executive's words. It's therefore very heartening that, following these smears and attempts to undermine it, the RNLI found itself on course for the highest annual fundraising total in its near 200-year history. Ms Harris, much has changed here over the centuries. Both the smaller Glasgow Humane Society and the larger RNLI have added the roles of being advisory and educational bodies. Progressing from its original purpose in 1824 of aiding ships in distress around the coasts of Britain and Ireland, the RNLI now identifies swimmers, paddleboarders, fishing crews and small boats in the Channel as making up the bulk of call-outs today, or as they put it, we are all about lifeboats and we are now about life-saving. We in Scotland have a strong working relationship with the RNLI, who provide joint safety training alongside Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and Police Scotland. We have a drowning prevention strategy which aims to reduce accidental drowning fatalities by 50% by 2026. And cooperation between the bodies, including RNLI, is vital to achieving this. Unsurprisingly, the steering group of Water Safety Scotland consists of Scottish Fire Rescue Service, the Royal Society for Prevention of Accidents, Police Scotland and RNLI. And we in Scotland will take this opportunity to thank the RNLI for the vital public service which they carry out, and we wish them well for the future and for the next 200 years.
Well,
thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair. Ms Harris, saying Happy Easter to everybody, and I'll congratulate the honourable member from Totnes on bringing the debate, and all members who've spoken about the RNLI and the brilliant work it does, their volunteers do around our coasts, and a special reference to the member for North Norfolk's stepmother, I think, in this context for her volunteering. I want to associate myself very strongly with the member for Glasgow South West's comments about the importance of rescuing everybody at sea, in particular in the English Channel, people on small boats. My honourable friend from Wirral West reminded us just how dangerous it was 200 years ago and less, and how many gave their lives to rescue others. And my honourable friend from Reading East talked about the importance of water safety on our inland waterways. These are important additions to the debate. Now, the mission statement for the RNLI says it all, really. The RNLI is committed to and focused upon the purpose they were created for 200 years ago, to save lives at sea. Founded as the Royal National Institution for the Preservation of Lives and Property from shipwreck in 1824, it was 30 years later, in 1854, that the name officially became the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, the RNLI, as we all know them as today. I know we all think of them as the fourth emergency service, along with the police, fire and ambulance services, so it is remarkable that 97% of their frontline staff are volunteers, and they're funded by charitable donations. As a charity independent of government, the volunteer lifesavers give their time for free, but they need training, they need well-maintained equipment, lifeboats and shore facilities, and part of the donations received go to fund these things. Almost 6,000 volunteer lifeboat crew members are stationed around the UK and Ireland, and ready when the call is received to spring into action to save the lives of those in danger at sea. Since its launch, the RNLI has saved the lives of 4,356 people across the North West and 146,000 people across the UK and Ireland. In my own constituency, they worked tirelessly and saved 5 lives, responding to nearly 200 incidents and aiding 1,000 people in 2022 alone across the boroughs of Sefton and Wirral. And I'm proud to say that Crosby Beach, which is in my constituency, is the only British beach which is patrolled by the RNLI all year round. All right, okay, great. Now, in Southport Cemetery, just outside my constituency, there's a monument to the 27 lives lost in the Mexico disaster, which happened almost 140 years ago. The rescue remains the worst loss of crew in a single incident in the history of the RNLI, and was reviewed as a national disaster across Victorian Britain. The Mexico, a huge wooden ship, left Liverpool on the 5th of December 1866 bound for Ecuador. She was caught in a violent gale, and amidst the heavy seas, she ran aground on the perilous sandbanks of the Ribble estuary. The rescue effort saw the biggest loss of crew in a single incident in the history of the RNLI, leaving 16 widows and 50 children without their fathers in Southport and in St Anne's. It was a stark reminder of the real risks these brave people undertook then, and it's a reminder today of the dangers every time they're called into action. But the RNLI's work is not just about reacting when things go wrong. They play a huge part in keeping our communities safe and reducing the need for search and rescue. It's done through a variety of ways: street stalls and classroom visits to educate and advise on the dangers of water. In 2021, the RNLI's water safety teams reached more than 27 million people with essential messaging, undoubtedly saving more lives and keeping families together. We can see how these vital services, how vital these services are. 238 lifeboat stations up and down the land, an active fleet of 431 lifeboats, ranging from large all-weather lifeboats to smaller inshore vessels, and we cannot overstate the impact and importance of their work. The RNLI will go to the aid of anyone in trouble at sea, as a life-saving charity that has been doing for 200 years. They do so without judgment or preference. And in South East England, they're currently engaged in a significant level of work in the Channel as a result of the high number of people crossing one of the world's busiest shipping lanes in small, overcrowded, unsafe boats. And those crossings all too often end with disastrous, fatal consequences. The RNLI launched to rescue 290 times in the English Channel in 2022. That was 3% of all RNLI lifeboat launches that year. The stories of desperate people crossing the English Channel to reach the UK often dominate news and social media. And of course, we cannot know the experiences, backgrounds and personal stories of every person trying to arrive in this way. But it is clear that many of them intend and do claim asylum here. So Labour will crack down on criminal smuggler gangs by introducing stronger powers for the UK's National Crime Agency to restrict the movement of those suspected of being involved in people smuggling, and setting up a new cross-border police unit with officers based in the UK and across Europe to tackle gangs. Because if we want to reduce the number of people in need of rescue in the Channel, it must make sense to cut the supply of boats by the criminal gangs. Our plans will reduce the numbers of people making the desperately dangerous crossing of the Channel in small boats. RNLI crews are asked in the UK by His Majesty's Coast Guard to assist anyone who is in trouble, on or in the water, and they will go to the aid of anyone in danger when asked to do so, as they've been doing for 200 years, and without asking who they are or where they come from. They respond in extremely demanding search and rescue environments with continued dedication and commitment. In any rescue, their priority is to ensure that casualties are treated with skill, care, dignity and respect, and brought to safety as quickly as possible. RNLI crews then pass over responsibility for those rescued to the most appropriate agency. That might be the ambulance service, it might be the police, it might be the border force. Now, to conclude, it was fantastic to see lifeboats on the River Mersey, near my own constituency, to celebrate the 200th anniversary of the RNLI. We should be incredibly proud of the crews who continue to respond selflessly to their pages, day or night, simply to help others. And I would like to pay tribute to them all here today, and also to everyone who plays a part in fundraising, rattling buckets or making donations for this vital, life-saving charity. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I would like to join the others in congratulating the Honourable Member for Totnes for securing this very moving and important debate today. And indeed, he spoke very eloquently of the work that the RNLI have done over the centuries, and he himself, I know, has been a long-term champion of the RNLI and has dedicated a lot of his time in Parliament to supporting them and helping them. But I enjoyed many of his many elements of his speech, from the gold teeth and the vintage Ferraris that have been donated to him, but most importantly, the tales of tragedy and heroism. Indeed, the tale that he mentioned of the Salcombe lifeboats, where 13 out of 15 died, which is absolutely devastating. And I'm very pleased to see so many contributions from across the entire United Kingdom here. I noticed that we have contributions from Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland, from the south coast of England to the north coast, and indeed even a contribution inland, which is just shows how important the RNLI is to everyone across the UK. And I say that as somebody who also has a landlocked constituency. So I'm delighted to be able to offer the government's congratulations to the RNLI on the momentous occasion of their 200th anniversary. And I'm sure that members here and across the House will want to join me in thanking the RNLI for their volunteers, their fundraisers and supporters for their amazing contribution to save lives over the last 2 centuries. Through the courageous and dedicated actions of RNLI volunteers, as we've heard, over 144,000 lives have been saved over the last 200 years.
Now, that works out as 700 lives per year, almost exactly 2 lives for every single day over the last 200 years. It really is quite a phenomenal achievement. The RNLI, I'll happily give way.
Land volunteers that support the RNLI, including Judith Richardson in my constituency, has given over 50 years' service, including being one of the last of the lady launchers who, until 1977, used to physically help drag the boat out to the sea.
To join the honourable member in paying tribute to the work the RNLI does, not just coastally but inland, as he says. And I know the brief of the RNLI, the remit has expanded over time. The RNLI has launched over 380,000 times over the century. It's quite an amazing dedication and commitment that it's shown. And during just last year, 2023, the RNLI lifeboats launched over 9,000 times in 1 year, aiding over 10,500 people and saving 269 lives just last year alone. And in addition, RNLI safe lifeguards carried out almost 3 million preventative actions, attended over 14,000 incidents, aiding 20,000 people and saving another 86 lives. And it's testimony to the commitment and skills of the RNLI and our lifeboat volunteers that the UK has one of the finest lifeboat services in the world. It continues to uphold the finest traditions and values of the RNLI as proudly today as they did 200 years ago. And I'd like to briefly remind the House of the history of the RNLI and its contributions to our society, something the Honourable Member for Totnes touched on. The founder of the RNLI was Sir William Hillary, so appalled at the loss of life at sea that he set about creating an institution that would be dedicated to the preservation of human life from shipwreck. Now, he initially went to the government to appeal for support, and the government of the day, in their wisdom or lack of it, said no, and he was, as has been mentioned before, he was forced to go to other supporters and philanthropists and managed to very rapidly get support, and which helped launch the institution we see today. And it's noticeable all the fundraising over the last 200 years, and that has indeed reached its record last year, is really a consequence of that government decision initially to say no, and it might have ended up being a very different organisation if the initial government decision had been differently. The drive and dedication of Sir William led to the institution that we know today. He had 12 resolutions laid out which form the foundation of the RNLI, and they still stand firm today. And they remain part of the RNLI's charter 200 years later. And the RNLI has really grown extraordinarily over the last 200 years. It now has an income of over £200 million, over 2,000 staff and over 30,000 volunteers. But I'd like to pay tribute to the visionary founders of the RNLI for its leadership and support over the years. The continuing dedication of the RNLI to save lives at sea and their volunteer ethos remains a cherished cornerstone of British society. And I'd like to put on record our tribute to the brave volunteers of the RNLI who risk their own lives to save others at sea and around our coastline. It is in a large part due to their personal commitment and skill that the UK has won the best records for water safety in the world. And I'd like to pay tribute also to their families of our search and rescue volunteers. They're often forgotten, but without their never-ending support, our volunteer services would not be able to continue their vital life-saving operations. And obviously, I'd like to pay particular tribute, as have members in the room, to the brave RNLI volunteers who have lost their lives while trying to save others over the past 200 years. Over 600 lives have been lost by volunteers, and they've won 2,500, been awarded 2,500 medals for bravery. And I know many members will be aware of the tragic loss of lifeboat volunteers from their constituencies over the last 2 centuries, and we've heard various examples of that this morning. The loss of every RNLI volunteer is keenly felt across a local community, impacting friends and family, and local memorials remain a reminder of the sacrifices of the RNLI crews who have been lost. And as part of this bicentenary anniversary, local services and events are planned to commemorate RNLI volunteers throughout its illustrious history. And now I want to come to some of the comments that have been made. And it's been a very moving morning, actually, because we have heard so many extraordinary stories of tragedy and terrorism and various other issues that have been raised, which I will come to. I was very touched by the member for Wirral West of the story of the traveller, where 8 out of 10 died, and she spoke very movingly of the impact of on the local community of Hoylake. The member for Torbay was pays tribute to the wider work that the RNLI does, particularly in the safety support in the community, and when he goes on his Boxing Day walks, and it's good to see the boat out there. And the landlocked member for Reading West raised the issue of whether the RNLI could help out on inland rescue, and that is search and rescue is the responsibility of the police, but he does make a very valid point, and I completely understand the importance of trying to learn the lessons from the RNLI, and anything can be done there to help improve search and rescue inland, and indeed the point he made about local people in boats and boatyards, whether they can be called on to help. And I will absolutely take that away to see if anything can be done to improve that. The member for Strangford, he again paid tribute to the work of the RNLI in Northern Ireland with its 10 lifeboat stations, but he raised a question about the government support, which was only 1% of the government total, and questioned that. I would say that the RNLI is obviously independent of government and very proudly independent of government. And I think if there is a risk if government funding increased that it would end up being more controlled by the government. But the government obviously does do, we have the HM Coast Guard is an operation that works very, very closely with the RNLI, and indeed we have representatives of them here at the moment, and indeed the calls come through to the Coast Guard. It works out how, whether it needs a helicopter which is run by the Coast Guard or whether it should be the RNLI, and it then hands over cases to the RNLI. And I understand that relationship works very, very well, but the RNLI is independent of government. It doesn't take instructions from government. It doesn't. It decides its own operations, and it's very proudly independent, and I wouldn't want to compromise that. The member for North Norfolk, I'd like to pay tribute to his stepmother to start off, and the work that she does for the RNLI. He mentioned the extraordinary case of Henry Block, who was involved in saving 873 lives over 53 years, a really quite extraordinary achievement. And I was very sad to learn about what's happening to the Bailey, his ship, and I would like to put on record that I'm very happy to do what I can to help save the Bailey. It's obviously fundamentally an issue for the local authorities there, but if he does want my support in any way, I'm very happy to do that. The member for Ernest Morn talked about the fundraising achievements of the RNLI in there, and in particular the Anglesey aluminium chimney demolition, which raised over £10,000 in one go, which is that must have been fun, pressing that button and seeing it go down. And the member for Glasgow South West, and also the shadow minister for member for Sefton Central, both pay tribute obviously to the RNLI, but also raise the issue about the migrants in the Channel. And I'd just like to put on record that my position is, and the government position is exactly the same, that the RNLI cannot ask people whether they've got a visa or not before deciding to rescue them, and it's absolutely right that they rescue everyone who needs rescuing, and that is very much the government's position. I then want to just come to the comments from the member for Torbay, who obviously has been in dispute with the RNLI, and it sort of sent a slightly different tone to the conversation. And Suffolk Coastal, Suffolk Coastal, who's been in disputes with the RNLI over the allocation of resources and the bequests. And I should say I'm told by the RNLI Chief Executive and the Regional Lifeboat Manager have responded to the Honourable Member's questions directly on a number of occasions, and that the Charities Commission have responded to her complaints about the usage of bequests. But they have advised they're satisfied with the way the RNLI has handled the legacy funding. But she recognised that the RNLI, as I said earlier, is independent from government, and this is not a dispute that the government can get involved with. The RNLI is independent. It decides the distribution of its assets. I'm advised that actually the RNLI generally does a really good job at just working out what the best allocations of assets are to make sure it's most effective at life-saving. And it would be really inappropriate for me as a minister or the government to intervene to influence the independent decisions of that charity. So just to close, I'd like to... I'll give way.
I simply want to say, I haven't asked the government to intervene. I appreciate the extraordinary work the RNLI does, and I think I highlighted that in my contribution today. There's a particular recent incident that I thought needed that, and frankly, before anybody seeks to insult me about representing my constituents, they should remind themselves they are insulting my constituents that I represent. So I just want to say to the Minister, I'm not asking in any way for the government to intervene, never. Never have, and it is right that the RNLI continues to be a thriving institution after 200 years, and I do wish it at least 200 years more.
The honourable member made the point well, and we're in agreement about its independence. So just to close, I'd like to say that the RNLI's achievements over the last 200 years have been, as we've heard, absolutely exceptional. Since its foundation in 1924, not a single year has passed without outstanding rescues, bravery, courageous and selfless acts. Advancements in life-saving assets and innovation to support their lifesavers through busy summers, wild winters, wars, pandemics have been at the core of everything the RNLI has achieved. And I'd like to invite members to join me in thanking the RNLI for their support and dedication over the last 200 years, and to wish them well as they seek to inspire and engage a new generation of supporters, of volunteers and fundraisers as they work towards securing their life-saving services for the next 200 years. Thank you.
Anthony Mandel, to
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if for nothing else we can all rest easy on the basis that we have made the member for North Norfolk Sunday gathering with his family and stepmother that much easier by the frequent referencing of the great work that she does. But this has been a tremendous debate in which we have celebrated the magnificence of the RNLI, its 200 years, and the extraordinary work that it has done across the country. And I know, Madam Chair, that if you were sitting here, you would want reference to the Mumbles lifeboat station in Swansea and the fantastic work they do, and so I'm pleased to be able to put that on record. But can I thank the members for Torbay, Wirral West, Reading East, Strangford, North Norfolk, Anismon, Glasgow South West, Sefton Central and Cambridge for their extraordinarily kind words and comments about an organisation that deserves far greater recognition and deserves all of the support we can give it for the next 200 years.
And can I too add my congratulations to the honourable member for Norfolk's stepmother. The question is that this House has considered the bicentenary of the RNLI. As many of that in opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. We will now suspend till 11 o'clock. Thank you.